Hey guys, my name is JC and today we're playing Teysa Karlov. This deck looks to take advantage of Teysa's ability by abusing death triggers and using them to take out its opponents. If you like the deck, swing by the channel where we have a deck tech discussing all of the included cards as well as the overall strategy. Let's see if we can defeat our opponents with a death by 1,000 cuts. Okay guys, let's see who we're playing today. We have Yuriko the Tiger's Shadow, we have Zakama Primal Calamity, and we have the Locust God. Alright, some big powerhouse commanders here today. Let's see how Teysa holds up. Alright, so if you take a look at our opening hand, I think this is a pretty strong keep. We have ramp, we have a potential win con, we can recur our creatures, card draw, and a sacrifice outlet. Pretty much everything that a sacrifice deck could want, so we'll hold on to this. Yuriko starts us off by playing a land for turn. And now they cast a Triton Shorestalker. Triton Shorestalker can't be blocked. And that is it for them. Zakama plays their land for turn, but they're just going to pass it from there. The Locust God plays a land. And now they cast a Brainstorm. Draw 3, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. And then they pass it over to us. We draw a land for turn. So we'll just start by playing our fetch land. We'll play our Flooded Strand, because we tend to be more black mana heavy in our deck, so we'll actually use this to go fetch up our Godless Shrine. We'll have that come into play untapped, because we're going to get down our Phyrexian Reclamation. It's not a target I'm worried about our opponents removing. It doesn't tend to draw a lot of hate, at least not in the early game. And then we'll pass it over. But we got to try to be as mana efficient as possible, especially against decks like Yuriko that tend to go pretty quick. Now Yuriko starts by playing a land. They move to combat. The Shorestalker goes towards Zakama. Now Yuriko activates Ninjutsu, bringing in Yuriko the Tiger's Shadow. Yuriko says whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to that card's mana value. It looks like they just reveal a land, so we don't take any damage, and that is it for their turn. Zakama plays a land, but that is going to be it for them. It's not usual that a Zakama deck doesn't have ramp on turn 2. The Locust God plays a fetch land for turn. They crack it right away. They put a land into play, and now they cast an Izzet Signet. But that is it for them. We draw another land for turn. So we'll actually start by playing our Swamp for turn. And I think now's the time to get down our Arcane Signet. I want to try to get Erebos out as early as possible so we can start drawing cards, especially if board wipes do start to hit. Which is always a chance with the Zakama player. So we get our Signet down, and then we'll just pass the turn. Yuriko plays a land for turn, a Reliquary Tower, so now they have no maximum hand size. And then they cast an Arcane Signet of their own. Now they move to combat. This time they go with the Locust God player. Damage goes through, that triggers Yuriko. Let's see what they hit. And they just get themselves another land, a Halimar Depths. Next, they recast their Triton Shorestalker. And that is it for their turn. Zakama plays a land for turn. And now they cast a Cultivate. But that is it for them. The Locust God plays a land. And now they cast Blue Sun Zenith with X equals 1. Target player draws X cards, shuffle Blue Sun Zenith into its owner's library. It's not usual that you see a Blue Sun Zenith cast for X equals 1, but they must be desperate maybe to hit their next land drop. But that is going to be their turn done. Alright, let's see what we draw for turn. We get a Blood Artist, okay. Well, we're happy to see more bodies, especially with Phyrexian Ultra and Erebos. So we'll play our Bloodstained Mire. We'll crack that. We'll put a Swamp into play. And then let's get Erebos onto the battlefield. And from here, we're just going to pass it over. Yuriko plays their Halimar Depths for turn. So when it ETBs, they can look at the top 3 cards of their library, then put them back in any order. That's going to be really great with their Yuriko triggers now. Now Yuriko does move to combat. Yuriko herself goes towards Zakama, and the Shorestalker goes towards the Locust God. So thus far we haven't been hit with any damage, which we're really happy to see because Erebos actually does require pay in life to draw cards. So they can just keep hitting our other opponents for us. That's going to help us in the long run. Now they do ninjutsu in Nashi, Moonsage's Scion. Whenever Nashi deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than its mana cost. So that gets them 2 Yuriko triggers. They hit a Ninja of the Deep Hours and a Dimir Infiltrator. So that puts us down to 30 life. Let's see what Nashi hits. A Sifter of Skulls from us. Oh, that's a little bit of a shame. That's a good card. A land, a Wildspine Worm, and they also get a land over there. Let's see if they play risky for the bisky and actually cast that Wildspine Worm. That'll take a big chunk out of their life, but it'll also be able to swing in for big damage as well. And they do. That's really awesome to see. So it's a 15/15 with Trample. When it dies, create 3 5/5s with Trample. And when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. And that is it for the Yuriko player. The Yuriko is always a deck that does get pretty dangerous pretty quickly, but now it's certainly putting a clock on things. I'll be interested to see where they send that World Spine Worm. Knowing our luck, it's probably going to start coming our way, seeing as we have been avoiding damage here. Zacama starts by playing a Reliquary Tower, so now they have no maximum hand size. And then they cast one of the worst cards we could hope to see, a Rest in Peace. When it ETBs exile all graveyards, if a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. But that is going to be it for their turn. The Locust God plays a land for turn. Now they cast Biden of Thassa. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. And for 1 and a blue, you can tap it. Creatures your opponents control attack this turn if able. But it looks like that's it for their turn. And we draw a Gift of Immortality for turn. So unfortunately, very strong card in this deck, but it is going to be shut off by Rest in Peace. So I think at the moment we're going to have to slow roll it and just hope that we either draw into our interaction to get rid of Rest in Peace, or hope that our other opponents start targeting each other. We probably have one small consolation in that because our opponents probably know that Rest in Peace is going to largely shut down our deck, they may leave us alone for a little while. So we'll just start by playing Takenuma. Then I think we'll cast Phyrexian Altar next. And then we'll follow that up with Zulaport Cutthroat. And then that'll have to be our turn done. It looks like Yuriko drew Temporal Mastery as their first card for turn, so they're going to be able to cast it for 2 mana, take an extra turn after this one, and then exile it. Now they play a land for turn. After that, they move to combat. All right, let's see where the worm goes. Looks like we have Nashi going towards Zacama. We have Yuriko going towards the Locust God. And unfortunately, we do have the big World Spine Worm coming our way. There's not really much point in us blocking here. We're not even going to get the death trigger from it, so we'll just have to take the damage. That goes through. It knocks us down to 15. So that's going to trigger Yuriko twice and Nashi once. The first card they reveal is Thousand Face Shadow, so we take 1 damage. The next is a land. Now Nashi gets a Smothering Abomination from us, a Clear the Mind from the Locust God, a Ranger's Path from Zacama, and a counter spell for themselves. They cast our Smothering Abomination. At the beginning of your upkeep, sack a creature. When you sack a creature, draw a card. What hurts the most about them stealing that is that Sacrifice actually gets around Rest in Peace, so we would have actually been able to draw cards from that. Now Yuriko also recast their Triton Shorestalker. And then they cast their Dimir Infiltrator. It can't be blocked, and they can also transmute it for 3 mana. So from the way things are looking, I think that the Yuriko player is probably going to run away with this, unless of course we see a board wipe over the next turn. But that is it for the Yuriko player. Right, so Yuriko now moves to their second turn. Smothering Abomination does trigger, so they're going to have to sacrifice a creature. And it looks like they sacrifice Yuriko herself, because she actually does get around command attacks anyway with ninjutsu, so it doesn't really matter losing her. That allows them to draw a card. Then they play a land for turn. Now they move to combat. If the worm comes our way, we're pretty much out of the game, unfortunately. Let's see if the Yuriko player shows us a small mercy. It looks like they don't. They're just going to take us out, put us out of our misery. The Smothering Abomination goes towards the Locust God. The Dimir Infiltrator as well. The Shorestalker goes towards Zacama. And so does Nashi. We'll just block with our Zulaport Cutthroat, even though it doesn't really matter. Now they activate Ninjutsu using Yuriko. So Yuriko's going at Zacama. And then they also ninjutsu in Thousand Face Shadow, which will be going at the Locust God. Now when it ETBs, it's going to make a copy of another creature. They make yet another World Spine Worm, which is actually a pretty cool interaction there. And the World Spine Worm is going towards the Locust God player. The damage goes through, we get taken out. That puts 3 Yuriko triggers on the stack, as well as Nashi. Looks like they had a Mist Syndicate Naga, a Skull Snatcher, and a Talisman of Dominance. Oh, and we also see the Locust God player go down there as well, so it's only a 1v1 versus Zacama, which I'm not liking the chances for the Zacama at all. Now Yuriko does pass it over to the Zacama player. And it looks like Zacama just concedes right there. All right, guys, that is the game done. Let's go to the review and discuss what happened. Well, that was a very solid game from the Yuriko player. Having access to card advantage and a win condition in the command zone, coupled with a relatively low mana curve, is a powerful combination to have, and we saw that here this game. All right, let's move on to game 2. All right, guys, we're in the second game. Let's see who we're playing. We have Sefris of the Hidden Ways. We have Kinnan Bond of Prodigy. And finally, we have the Locust God again. All right, if we take a look at this opening hand, it is not a keeper at all. So let's mulligan straight away. Nothing to analyze there. All right, if we take a look at this second hand, it's not bad. I would like some ramp, but we do have access to card draw, a sacrifice piece, as well as a strong interactive piece. So I think we'll actually keep this. We just have to really hope that the Kinnan player in particular doesn't get off to too fast a start. The Locust God starts by playing an Is It Boiler Works for turn, but I don't know if they actually looked at that correctly, because playing that just automatically bounces itself. So I hope they don't concede here. That was a little bit of a mistake, but that's essentially skipped their turn. So that's a little unfortunate for them, but it does happen to the best of us. So they're just going to pass it right over to us. So I guess technically we're going first this game, which isn't a bad position to be in at all, especially against faster decks like Kinnan. Now we draw a land for turn. So we'll just start by playing that land. We'll crack it. We'll find our Godless Shrine. We'll put that into play tapped. And then we'll pass the turn over. Sefris plays their land for turn. It just comes into play tapped. And they're just going to pass it right on over. Kinnan plays their land for turn. It also comes into play tapped. And that is it for them. The Locust God plays the land. But that is it for them. Alright, and we draw Ophiomancer for turn. I think what we'll do is we'll play our other fetch land. We'll crack that right away. We'll put our swamp into play. And then we'll pass it over. Sefris starts by cycling a Lonely Sandbar. So they'll discard that and then draw. Next they play a land for turn. And then they cast a Soul Ring. Then they follow that up by cycling a Remote Isle. And that is going to be it for the Sefris player. Kinnan plays a land for turn. And now they cast a Paradise Druid. It has hexproof as long as it's untapped, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. And that is it for them. It looks like the Locust God doesn't play a land here, and they're just moving straight to their end step. So I'm not really too sure what's going on. They do have that bounce land in hand. They could play this and bounce their mountain back to their hand. So now they move to cleanup. Let's see if they discard anything relevant. And instead they actually decide to concede the game there. Alright, so it moves straight to our turn, and there's only 3 of us left. We draw a Gift of Immortality for turn. Well, that's really great. I was a little sad we didn't get to use that the last game, so hopefully this game will be different. We'll play our Isolated Chapel for turn. And I think now's the time to get down our Ophiomancer. That resolves. And then we'll pass the turn from here. Ophiomancer is going to combo really nicely with Erebos, because Erebos doesn't care what type of creature dies, whether it's token or non-token. So we're going to potentially be able to draw cards every turn, especially with Ashnod's Altar. Now Ophiomancer does trigger on Sefris's upkeep. So we're going to make a Snake with Death Touch. Sefris plays a land for turn. Then they cast Rilsa Royale, Kingpin, Death Touch. When it ETBs, you take the initiative. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. If you've completed a dungeon, that creature also gets +5/+0 and gains First Strike and Menace until end of turn. So now when it ETBs, they do take the initiative. Now they're going to venture into the Undercity, so they'll be able to search their library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into their hand, and then shuffle. I'm really happy that the initiative is part of the game now, because with our Death Touch Snake tokens, we're going to be able to take it quite easily, at least this early in the game. It's going to help us to make sure we at least hit our land drop next turn. And that is it for their turn. Kinnan plays a land for turn. And now they cast their commander, Kinnan Bond to Prodigy. Whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced. And for 7 mana, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Next, they cast a Sakura Tribe Elder. And that is going to be it for them. We draw a Nested Shambler for turn. So we'll start by playing our Phyrexian Tower for turn. Then next, we're going to cast Erebos. That's going to allow us to draw a card in case the Sefris player does decide to block here. That goes through. Now we'll move to combat. We'll send the Snake towards Sefris. They actually do decide to block here, surprisingly. So they must really want to hold on to that initiative. Now we'll trigger Erebos. We're going to pay the 2 life so we can draw a card. And we get ourselves a Grave Pact. That's a really solid card, especially against Kinnan. That should slow them down quite a bit. And now we move to the Sefris player's turn. The initiative and Ophiomancer trigger on their upkeep. So we'll make a Snake. Now they're going to venture further into the Undercity. Let's see which direction they decide to go. They go into the Lost Well, so they'll be able to scry 2. Now they play a land for turn. And then they cast their commander, Sefris of the Hidden Ways. Whenever 1 or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This ability triggers only once each turn. And whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. After that, they cast a Tortured Existence. For black and discard a creature card, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And now they cycle a Street Wraith, which does actually trigger Sefris. They've moved into the arena now, so they're going to decide to goad our Death Touch creature, which means that it's not going to be able to swing in Sefris's way. They're going to lose 2 life for cycling Street Wraith. And that is it for their turn. On their end step, Kinnan does sacrifice their Sakura Tribe Elder. So they're going to put a basic land into play tapped. And now we move to the Kinnan player's turn. Kinnan plays a land. And they're just going to pass the turn there, very likely leaving their mana up so they can actually activate Kinnan. So let's go to our turn, see what we draw. We get ourselves a Pawn of Ulamog. Okay, that is a solid ramp piece. So let's start by playing our Silent Clearing for turn. Then I think we'll get down our Ashnod's Altar. Now we're going to sack our Snake token. That'll trigger Erebos. We'll draw a card. And we get ourselves a Pitiless Plunderer. That's a really good draw there. And then I think we'll actually get down our Pawn of Ulamog. Because that's going to help us generate a lot of bodies, which is going to really feed well into Grave Pact as well as Pitiless Plunderer. And then I think that's going to be us done for turn. The Initiative and Ophiomancer trigger on Sefris' upkeep. So we'll make a Snake token. The Initiative triggers, so they can either draw a card or make a 4/1 Black Skeleton creature token with Menace. I'm sure they're going to probably draw a card here. And it looks like they do. So they're one room away from actually completing the Undercity, which is actually a pretty dangerous ability. And I have no doubt we're probably going to see them venture into the room this turn. Now they do play a land for turn. Next, they cast a Dimir Signet. After that, they cast Buried Alive. Search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. The Kinnan player has no response to that. So that will go through. Let's see what they find. Looks like they get themselves a Safana, Kalanport Cutthroat. We have Imoan Mystic Trickster, and we also have Radiant Solar. And that does trigger Sefris. So they are going to venture into the final room of the Undercity. Reveal the top 10 cards of your library, put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters on it. It gains hexproof until your next turn, then shuffle. They find themselves a Barrowin of Clan Undor. When it ETBs, venture into the dungeon, and whenever Barrowin of Clan Undor attacks, return up to 1 creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield if you've completed a dungeon. So now it is going to ETB venturing into the dungeon. They decide to go into the Lost Mine of Phandelver, scrying 1. Now that does trigger Sefris, so they're also going to return a target creature card from their graveyard to the battlefield. And they're targeting the Radiant Solar. Radiant Solar has flying and lifelink. Whenever it ETBs or another non-token creature enters the battlefield, under your control, venture into the dungeon, and for a white you can discard it, and you venture into the dungeon and you gain 3 life. So its ability will trigger now. They decide to mine the tunnel, so they create a treasure token. And now they cast a Cathar Commando. You can pay 1, sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. That also triggers Radiant Solar, so they'll venture further into the dungeon. This time they decide to go into the Dark Pool. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. And that is going to be it for their turn. And what a turn that was. We've got to really hope here that they don't actually use their Cathar Commando on our Ashnod's Altar. It's not going to completely shut us down, but it will hold us back a bit, especially from using that Grave Pact. Alright, Kinnan does have a response on their end step. They decide to activate Kinnan. Let's see if they get a hit. And it looks like they find themselves a Mind Shrieker. You can pay 2 mana into it, target player mills a card, then Mind Shrieker gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the milled card's mana value. And after that, we move to the Kinnan player's turn. They start by playing a land for turn. Next, they cast a Talisman of Curiosity. But it looks like that's going to be it for them. It looks like on our end step, they are going to be activating their Cathar Commando. No, instead, they're actually activating Tortured Existence here. So they're looking to return their Street Wraith to their hand, and they discarded a Sun Titan. That also triggers Sefris. So now they venture to the Temple of Dumathoin, so they draw a card. That's also going to trigger Sefris once again, and they're going to return Sun Titan to the battlefield. So the Sefris value engine is certainly online now. When Sun Titan ETBs, it's going to trigger Radiant Solar and Sun Titan. So now they're going to venture further into a dungeon. And it looks like they decide to go through the Lost Mine of Phandelver, scrying 1. Now Sun Titan's looking to return Safana to the battlefield. Safana says at the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, create a treasure token. Create 3 of those tokens instead if you've completed a dungeon. That triggers the Radiant Solar, so they're going to go further into the Lost Mine of Phandelver, this time making a 1/1 red goblin creature token. And finally, the Street Wraith returns to their hand. And now we move to our turn. So unfortunately, because they do have a treasure there, they still have access to their Cathar Commando. In case we go a little too crazy, we draw Blightmound for turn. So we have a tough choice here because whatever we end up playing out is probably going to attract the attention of that Cathar Commando to take out our Ashnod's Altar. If we play Pitiless Plunderer, that's going to attract the attention. Grave Pact certainly is. Gift of Immortality as well. So we're in a bit of a tough position here. And it looks like we actually have the Kinnan player scooping up there. Maybe they feel like the value engine that the Sefris player currently has on board is just too much for them to handle. That unfortunately does mean that we're going to be attracting the attention of their interaction now, which being able to recur their Cathar Commando is not going to be good news for us. So I think what we'll do to start is we'll sacrifice our Snake token. That'll trigger Erebos. We'll draw a card. And we get a Grim Haruspex. And then I think we'll actually try to go for Yosei here. We don't have much of a choice, but I think it's the only one we can go for at the moment. That goes through. So we'll sacrifice Yosei straight away while our opponents pass priority. That's going to trigger Pawn of Ulamog, Erebos, and Yosei. So we'll definitely target our opponent with Yosei's trigger. We'll definitely tap down their Sun Titan, their Radiant Solar, Safana, their Sol Ring, and their Dimir Signet. So now we'll make a spawn token. Looks like Sefris has a response here. They sacrifice the Cathar Commando, targeting our altar. Now that does trigger Sefris. They decide to venture in the Lost Mine of Phandelver, so each opponent's going to lose a life, they'll gain a life. We don't have any responses there, we'll allow that to go through. So now we make our spawn token, Erebos does trigger. We'll definitely draw a card. We get a Midnight Reaper, and finally Yosei resolves. Next, we're actually going to get down our Pitiless Plunderer. So we'll sacrifice our spawn token. That's going to trigger Erebos. We'll draw once again. And we get ourselves a Loyal Warhound. And now let's cast our Pitiless Plunderer. So now that does animate Erebos. And then we'll just pass the turn to our opponent. So Yosei getting through there was a real big key step into us at least having a chance of getting back in this game. So let's just hope our opponent can't do too much next turn. Ophiomancer and the initiative trigger on their upkeep. So we'll make a Death Touch Snake. They're going to venture further into the dungeon. They venture into the Lost Mine of Phandelver. That's going to allow them to draw a card. That's also going to trigger Sefris, so they'll return a creature to the battlefield, and it looks like they're returning Rissal Real, Kingpin. That triggers Radiant Solar. Now in response, they cycle Street Wraith, which actually does activate Sefris. Now Radiant Solar triggers. They go further into the Lost Mine, making a treasure token. And now they gain the initiative from Rissal Real. This time they give -4, -0, and they're targeting our Erebos. Now they move to combat. Let's see if they swing in. It looks like they do with Barrowin. That triggers Rissal Real and Barrowin. So now Barrowin is going to trigger. It's going to return a creature card with mana value 3 or less from their graveyard to the battlefield. They return the Imoan Mystic Trickster. That is going to trigger Radiant Solar. So now they venture into the final room of Lost Mine of Phandelver. That's going to draw them a card. And then that will trigger Sefris. So they're going to return another creature to the battlefield. This time they target their Cathar Commando. That will trigger Radiant Solar once again. And once again, they go back into the Lost Mine of Phandelver, scrying 1. Now, Rissal Real does trigger. That is going to buff Barrowin up. It's going to gain Death Touch. It also becomes an 11/6. Now, unfortunately, because it does have First Strike, it means we can't just put our Snake into the way. But in this case, I think we will. We'll actually put Erebos in front as well as our Snake token. Now, the Snake dying does trigger Pitiless Plunderer and Erebos. So we'll start by drawing a card by paying 2 life. We get a land. Now we'll make a treasure token. Luckily for us, Erebos absorbs all the damage. Now on the end step, Imoan and Safana do trigger. Imoan's going to allow them to draw a card and then draw another one because they have completed a dungeon. And now they're going to make 3 treasure tokens. And now we move to our turn. They have 9 cards in hand, so they will have to discard. And they discard an Obsessive Stitcher and a Dream Trawler. Alright, Ophiomancer triggers on our upkeep, so we'll make a Snake. Now we also draw a Phyrexian Altar for turn, which would be really great if that Cathar Commando wasn't out. So let's start by resolving Teysa first. We're going to use Phyrexian Tower to sack our Snake token. That'll trigger Plunderer and Erebos. So we're definitely going to go deep on life at the moment. We're going to try to draw as many cards as we can. I don't think we're going to survive to next turn unless we do something now. So we'll pay the 2 life. We'll draw a card. We get a land. And notably, that land can actually return Yosei. So that's quite interesting. That wouldn't necessarily completely stop them, but again, it would slow them down. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so let's get down Teysa. And so now we have Teysa down. Pitiless Plunderer is going to make us 2 treasures for every creature that we kill. And now we can actually afford to pay Erebos' activation cost, so we can sack another creature and actually take out the Cathar Commando, so it'll help us to actually resolve the Phyrexian Altar. So I think that might actually be the game plan here. So let's use Erebos. We'll target the Cathar Commando. We'll use the 2 treasure tokens. We're going to sacrifice Ophiomancer. It's going to put a lot of triggers on the stack. All right, so we'll make 2 spawn tokens first. I am going to draw here. We're playing a black deck, so the name of the game is to pay the life. So we draw Necropotence. We get Plumb the Forbidden. Okay, that's actually a really good one. Now we'll make 2 treasure tokens. And now let's see if they respond. It looks like they respond by cycling a Striped Riverwinder, which is going to trigger Sefris. That allows them to go further into the Lost Mine. They'll make a treasure token. Next, they cycle a Polluted Mire. And now that does go down. So that is good news for us. They still have that Tortured Existence available, but they'll have to pay 1 black and discard a creature to return it to their hand. So they shouldn't actually have enough mana to be able to do anything with it. So now that we're freed up, let's sacrifice one of our spawn tokens. We will pay the 2 life. We draw a land. And we draw a Sifter of Skulls. Then we make 2 more treasure tokens. Now we're going to cast our Phyrexian Altar. That goes through. Now we're going to sacrifice our Eldrazi Spawn for a black mana. That's going to trigger Pitiless Plunderer twice, as well as Erebos twice. I don't think we actually need to pay the life anymore because we can actually try to get down our Grim Haruspex and that'll help us out. So we won't pay here, seeing as we're starting to get pretty low. And we may need the extra life for some of our other effects. But we'll definitely take the 2 treasure tokens. Now we'll cast our Grim Haruspex. Then we'll cast our Nested Shambler. Now we'll sacrifice the Nested Shambler. We'll sacrifice it for a black mana. That's going to put a lot of triggers onto the stack. So we'll make 2 Spawn tokens. We're going to draw 2 cards. We get a Luminous Broodmoth. That's a really solid hit. And Junji the Midnight Sky. Another really good one. So we won't draw from Erebos. We'll make 2 treasure tokens. Now we'll make some Squirrel tokens. And now's our time to get our Grave Pact into play. So we can start clearing this board up. That resolves. Right now, let's sacrifice one of our Eldrazi Spawn tokens. That's going to trigger Erebos twice, Pitiless Plunderer twice, and importantly, our Grave Pact twice. So our opponent's going to have to sacrifice 2 creatures here. It looks like they're sacrificing their treasures in response, and they actually use Cyclonic Rift, bouncing back our Grave Pact. Well, that's not a problem for us. In response, we will sacrifice our Eldrazi Spawn tokens, though. So we'll put some more triggers onto the stack. So now Sefris is sacrificing their creatures. We won't draw from Erebos. Now we'll sacrifice our Squirrel. We'll actually let the Cyclonic Rift resolve now. They still will have to sacrifice 1 more with a Grave Pact trigger on the stack. We'll make some more treasures. Next, we're going to replay Grave Pact. Then we're going to cast Blightmound. Then I think we'll play Loyal Warhound. That'll put another body onto the battlefield. Then we'll sacrifice it using our altar. That puts a lot of triggers onto the stack. So now we finally cleared up the Sefris player's board. We make 2 pest tokens, then 2 treasures. Once again, we don't draw from Erebos. We'll draw 2 cards from Grim Haruspex, a land, and another land. Then we'll make 2 tokens. We'll play our command tower for turn. And I think we're actually going to try to lock our opponents down here by getting Yosei back to our hand. So let's activate Takenuma. We'll return Yosei to our hand. We'll sacrifice these pest tokens, because importantly, it's going to gain us the life back that we need. We make 2 treasures. Now I am actually happy to draw from Erebos. We draw an Elenda and a Volrath Stronghold. Now let's cast Yosei. That goes through. And so now when we actually sacrifice Yosei, we're going to get 2 triggers from it, which means that our opponent is going to have to skip the next 2 untapped steps, which is pretty much going to almost guarantee us the game here. So we'll pick our opponent. So now we make 2 more tokens. We draw 2 more cards, a land, and a Crowded Crypt. We'll use Erebos' ability. Oh, there we go. We get a Blood Artist. That's perfect. And then also a Black Market. We make 2 treasures, 2 pest tokens, and now both Yoseis resolve. So I think from here, we'll just finish up by casting our Blood Artist. So I just messaged my opponent, letting them know that I actually had a lender in hand, and I think we can actually get the job done with Blood Artist. So I've just asked them if they want us to actually play it out, or if they're happy to call it a game there. So we'll soon wait and see. Well, while we're waiting, we will actually play out our Elenda, just to show our opponent that we do have it. So I haven't actually heard from our opponent yet, so I think we'll just keep playing it out until they decide to concede. So we'll start sacrificing our tokens, and I'll fast forward through this just so you guys don't have to sit and watch everything. And it looks like our opponent has seen enough, and that is the game done there, guys. All right, well, let's go to the review and discuss what happened. Well, that game ended up being very close for us. The Sefris player had a very strong value engine set up, and if they had untapped with their board state for 1 more turn, I honestly don't think we would have survived it. Fortunately for us, Yosei showed up just in time and bought us the turn we needed to set up our value engines and close out the game. If you've never played with Yosei before, then I highly suggest you do, as it's a card that's always pulled its weight in this list. Well, that's it from me today. Teysa Karlov was actually the 2nd deck I ever built in Commander, so it's always had a special place in my heart, and I hope you enjoyed seeing it in action. Until next time, guys.